Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I thought it was about time that I did an updated list of horror recommendations for beginners or newbies. And I've definitely done videos like this before, but it's been a while. If I remember, I'll have them linked down below and in the cards. So if you want more recommendations, you can go there. These are going to be all new books, and particularly books that I think are first really good entry points into the genre. I also want to pick out books that I think are very representative of the subgenres of horror that they are written in, and so kind of give you a good taste if you want to try out survival horror or supernatural horror, for example. And also, I think that these are books that generally would appeal pretty widely to a large audience. I don't need to know a particular person's niche tastes in books in order to hand these books over to them. I think that they have just a lot of what I call wide appeal. And I know a lot of my audience are already avid horror fans, but hopefully you'll stick around because I know I love to watch these videos. I love to see other people's recommendations. I'm definitely going to ask you all to offer your recommendations down below. And if you are new to horror, hopefully you find this helpful, or perhaps even again, if you're a horror reader, this might give you ideas of what horror books to shove in the hands of your friends that don't read the genre and you're trying to get them into horror because, of course, we all want all of our friends to read as much horror as we do. That being said, let's get into the book recommendations. Now, when I started preparing for this video, the first book that came to mind was The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. This is set in a small town where there are a series of grisly murders that are taking place. The story is told from multiple perspectives, one being a police officer who's investigating these crimes, and he is a little bit perplexed by the fact that no one seems to be overly concerned that these young girls are dying in brutal ways. And the story is also told from the perspective of two childhood best friends, these young preteen girls who are slowly coming of age. They have been best friends forever. However, one of them is getting more into boys, the other one isn't ready to give up their childhood, and they are growing apart. There is also the perspective of a younger brother who possibly has some supernatural powers, and they start to see images of the dead girls and start to get messages from beyond, and slowly all of the supernatural elements come together into this wonderful tale. Now, the reason that I want to recommend this book in this video is the fact that it really hits upon a lot of the classic horror tropes of the genre and is a great starting point for supernatural horror. There are witches, there are ghosts, and I just think that if you're new to the genre, you may not have seen these tropes before. I have seen them a lot, but I find that this book just does a really good job of representing them. I always say that this book is very comforting as a horror reader, and it also just doesn't have any weird stuff in it, as you'll come to understand as you get further into the genre. I don't need to give a lot of content warnings. This one is perhaps predictable, but again, if it's your first horror book, maybe you won't see the ending coming, and even if you do, it's just an enjoyable ride and will really give you a good idea if you enjoy this subgenre, if this is the kind of horror stories that you want to enjoy, because there are so many like this. And yeah, this is just a perfect place to dip your toes into the genre. Next up, I want to talk about The Forgotten Island by David Sodergren. And this is a piece of survival horror that follows two sisters who have been estranged and are trying to reconnect. They end up going on vacation to Thailand with their boyfriends. They party, they have fun. However, unbeknownst to them, there is an ancient evil in the jungle there, and it is maybe coming for people. This is a book that I want to recommend for so many reasons. First being the fact that I really do feel like it has so much wide appeal. If someone who I didn't know just said, recommend me a horror book, this is probably one of the top books I would pick out, because to me, it just really, like I said, would appeal to just about anyone. I think that is very relatable. The characters were well developed. The story is fun. It moves at a good pace. It is just enjoyable to read. I think it's very representative of the survival horror genre, which is really fun to consume. I think there's a lot of movies like this, and so for those that are looking to try it in book form, this is an excellent place place to start. With the survival horror genre, you always get the breakdown of the family or usually the friend group. And so you get that here, you get the sisters and their boyfriends, and they're trying to survive, but it's the question of, are they willing to stick together or will they turn on each other in order to prioritize their own survival? This one has some great kills, some gruesome moments, but it's not too much. And despite all that, I don't need to give a lot of content warnings. There is no harm to animals in this book. Let me say that again, because it is so rare and so wonderful. And yeah, I just think this book is a blast. I really have no criticisms of this book. I never have, and just would love to see more people checking it out because in my opinion, it is still a hidden gem and I would love to change that. Next up, I want to talk about Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky, and this is a piece of epic supernatural horror. This story follows a young mother who is going to a new town with her son in order to get a fresh start, and they're very much financially struggling. The son is also struggling in school. He has some sort of learning disability. One day he disappears and shows up days later and is changed. He seems to have a higher intellect. He no longer struggles in school, and he also says that he has an imaginary friend who is giving him instructions and telling him to do things. This is a book that's told over multiple perspectives, which is why I would call it epic horror, because the stakes are really high. It's also very supernatural. Again, you have characters talking to entities that may or may not be there, and the story really builds. I would recommend this one particularly to younger readers. So of course, Stephen Chbosky is known for his iconic YA classic, and so if you're perhaps a younger reader who is looking to get into adult fiction, particularly adult horror, this is a really good stepping stone. It is adult, but I also think that it has that crossover appeal, and I think that it does a lot of things that you will see in books written by, per se, Stephen King. But while Stephen King is known for going to some strange places, there's definitely some childhood orgies in his books and some just questionable subject matter that isn't always suitable, certain things that have not aged well over the years. This one does not have those elements in it. So again, I kind of feel like it's a safer pick for those that want to try something in the vein of Stephen King, but are a bit intimidated to get into his work. Those of you that are already Stephen King fans, I think, will find this to be perhaps a watered down version of that. But like I said, as a stepping stone, as a place for beginners to start, I really think that this gives you a good idea of what those books are like. And I really enjoy this one. I fully admit that it's not perfect. There is a lot of religious themes and overtones, which were a little bit heavy-handed for me, but I still found the book very exciting. It has some climactic moments. It is perhaps too many climactic moments. And I will admit that the ending was a letdown. But I could argue that if you are new to horror and are getting into the genre, one thing you need to get used to is that there are so many amazing horror books out there with really weak endings. And even talking to other huge horror fans, I think a lot of you will agree that some of our favorite horror books kind of let us down with a anticlimactic ending. So maybe in that way, this is a perfect book to try out and get used to that kind of underwhelming feeling that you get when the author just does not stick the landing. But yeah, I enjoyed this one. I would recommend it, especially to people newer to the genre. Next, I want to recommend The Last Harvest by Kim Leggett, and this is technically a piece of young adult horror, but I do think that it will appeal to adult readers like myself. And this is a book that is set in a small town. It follows a former quarterback star who has stepped down from the team because he has taken over the family farm after the passing of his father. In the time leading up to his father's death, he started to act crazy. There's a question of whether he was schizophrenic, and he ended up dying in the arms of his son, saying, "I plead the blood." Now the son is starting to imagine things. He worries that he is also going crazy like his father. And then the story is also tied in with a piece of folk horror because you find out that this town itself has secrets. There is a secret society that is influencing what is happening in the town, and everything ties together. This is a book I want to recommend for those of you that want to try out folk horror or horror that involves small town secrets, which again are tropes you will see over and over again in the genre and really are just so iconic. As I mentioned, this is young adult, so in terms of the writing, it's very approachable. I think the story is very straightforward, but it doesn't play down or make anything dumb for the sake of the reader. It is a very smart and well-written book. If I had a single complaint about it, it's the fact that there is a teen relationship or romance going on in the background, which I did not care about, but you will hear me say that in pretty much every YA horror book that I review. Other than that element, I really think that it captures, again, folk horror really well. It is creepy. It's also great to read around the fall because of the setting and the harvest, and yeah, I think it's just a really good quick read and definitely one I would recommend if you're interested in checking it out. Sticking with young adult horror, I also want to recommend Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar, which again is targeted at a teen audience but completely will work for adults. And this book is set in a small town. It follows a father and their daughter that are moving there in order to get a fresh start. And the daughter makes friends with the other teenagers and finds out that in this town there has been an economic drop or loss in work, and the older generation is blaming the younger generation, so there is tension between the two groups of people. This town also has a mascot, which happens to be a clown, and this book basically spirals into the horror book version of a teen slasher. This author I have read before, and he is so self-aware of all the tropes of the genre that I think that this book is incredibly smart. I really liked the character work. I felt like they were very real teenagers. I believe the author is a high school teacher, and you can tell because he definitely knows how teenagers talk, how they act, and it's not always flattering, but it is very enjoyable to read. I think a lot of people trying to get into horror fiction, again, are also probably people who watch horror movies from time to time and are familiar with some of the more classic teen slashers like Scream. So if you're looking for a movie or a book version that is going to involve cutting down teenagers, a creepy clown, all of that, I really think that this book is going to give you the feels that you're looking for, and again, just a really good stepping stone into the genre. And yeah, this one is perfect, so I really enjoyed it. Last but definitely not least, I want to recommend Camp Slaughter by Sergio Gomez. This book is told over multiple points of view, one being a group of college students that rent a cabin in the woods. The story is also told from the perspective of journalists who are investigating the fact that people are going missing in these woods. And then we have a third perspective of the cannibals that happen to live in the woods and are possibly responsible for those disappearances. This is an excellent example of slasher horror and particularly cannibal horror. It is gruesome, it is terrifying, it is so much fun, and it's really classic. I think for those of you, again, that love that slasher, more intense horror when it comes to your movies, you will not be disappointed in reading this one. Now, for those of you watching this, you might be surprised that I'm including this book in the video because when I watch other people's recommendations for newbies, there's always this assumption that because you are new to the genre, it means you're a scaredy cat, it means you're afraid that horror books are going to be too scary. But while that is true for some new horror readers, and again, I included other books that are less scary on this list, I also believe that some people have trouble getting into the genre because they struggle to find a book that will scare them. I was one of those people. I started reading horror and I found them boring because the first couple I read didn't connect with me. I wasn't immersed, and so I wasn't scared. And reading a horror book that you expect to scare you and doesn't is just disappointing. So I know for me, it was finally when I started to read some super scary horror books that I fell in love with the genre. And so for those of you that are not afraid of reading something a little bit more intense, I'll be honest, this one scared me, and I read a lot of horror, but I think you can handle it if you're willing to go there. And I think this is a great entry point because while it is scary, while it is disturbing, I don't think that it's inappropriate. I don't think it really needs a lot of content warnings outside of the murderous cannibal angle. And it's just intense and fun, and you will fly through it and hopefully get as addicted to the horror genre as I am and become a lifelong horror reader. So again, for those of you that want something really intense, you want to turn up the scares to a level 10, this is my recommendation for those particular newbies that are looking to get into the genre. So that is it for this video here. I would love to hear down below of the books I talked about, which ones are you planning on checking out yourself, or would you pass them along to other readers in your life? If you are a horror fan, I would love to hear your own recommendations. What books do you put in people's hand when you're trying to get them to give horror a chance and they want a book that's going to scare them? So I really love for you to all crowdsource with me and give me your recommendations as well. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of horror as well as thrillers, science fiction, and fantasy. I've done a lot of horror recommendations before, so again, I'm going to have a playlist linked down below and in the cards. So if you want even more horror recommendations, whether you're new to the genre or have been reading it for years, I think you'll have something there that will appeal to you. Otherwise, you can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online, and if you hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.